Hey, I'm Brian.
And I'm Molly. We're the Wallens.
We're musicians who travel the world together, and we sleep in our van.
In other words, life is normal.
The rain is falling softly on the ground, and the lights are on the Christmas tree. Well, after a brief hiatus, we're back. We took some time after our wedding to visit a couple of places we'd been wanting to go for a very long time: Scotland and Ireland. The next two episodes will focus on Scotland. I should note, we had a bunch of great driving footage from the trip that we were excited to show you, but we left our GoPro in the rental car by mistake. Now, even though we let Hertz know immediately, even though we knew exactly where the camera was, and even though a Scottish police officer called them on our behalf, they still couldn't find it. It's ultimately our fault, but it's safe to say that there's no honor among rental car agencies. Enough about that. We flew from Chicago to Glasgow with a connection in Dublin. We got in about 8 a.m., picked up our car, and went immediately in search of adventure. The first town we stopped in was Paisley, once a center for the weaving industry and the namesake for the Paisley pattern. Our first restaurant was a winner, Café Lusso. We had a great Scottish breakfast, drank some tea to cope with our jet lag, and watched the rain fall through the front window. From there, we booked it north through Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. The scenery was terrific. We had no idea what to expect from Scotland, and we came to find that the answer was spectacular mountains, rivers, forests, and waterfalls around every turn. Not to mention the very peak of fall colors. And just when we thought it couldn't get much better, we broke out of the Trossachs and into the Highlands. The road between the Trossachs and Loch Leun winds through jaw-dropping terrain, and by the time we stopped for afternoon coffee in Glencoe, we were pinching ourselves to make sure we weren't dreaming. Our stop the first night was a charming B&B just outside of Fort William, which sits in the shadow of Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in the British Isles. We took an afternoon stroll through this quaint city of 10,000, enjoying the shops and learning some local history at the West Highland Museum. When dinner time came, we stopped into Garrison West, a cozy pub with wonderful food. The next morning, we were off to the Isle of Skye, but not before passing through some of the most spectacular Highland scenery we would see on the whole trip. Fall colors, beautiful reflections in the lake. We were blessed with an amazing start to our second day in Scotland. The Isle of Skye is a significant place for Molly. Her family heritage traces back to Portree, a village on the east side of the island. On the way in, we passed by the famous Eilean Donan Castle and headed over the spectacular Skye Bridge. Once on the Isle, we were rewarded with yet more breathtaking scenery and rainbows at every turn. A hike along the Scorrybreck Trail, just outside of Portree, seemed to have a spiritual significance for Molly as she reflected on her family heritage. On the way back to Broadford, our stop for the night, a rainbow followed us the entire way, and when we pulled into our B&B, the view of the ocean and that colorful ray of light was enough to leave us temporarily speechless. On our third day of the trip, we packed up the car and headed east, driving past the famous Loch Ness in the process. We made a stop at Urquhart Castle, which was a really interesting experience. We recommend picking up the Explorer Pass when you visit Scotland. There are so many historic sites you'll want to see. So we drove on through Inverness, making an afternoon stop for soup and tea, and then on to Fort George, a 1757 garrison that is still in use by the military today. We particularly enjoyed visiting the fort's chapel. From Fort George, we headed back through Inverness and further north. At this point, Molly and I were further north than we had ever been in our lives, at the same latitude as Juneau, Alaska, Gothenburg, Sweden, and the northernmost settlement in Newfoundland. So where were we? The town that stole both of our hearts, Cromarty. We stayed at a little flat right in the middle of town, and we were able to walk to everything. Cromarty is a small town with a population of less than 1,000, but they have everything you need. A grocery store, a bakery, a couple of pubs, a tea room, and a killer coffee shop called the Slaughterhouse. We stayed here for 3 days, and I'm so grateful for that. Traveling isn't just about the things you see, it's about really getting to know a local culture, to smell and taste and feel what makes a place the way it is. I don't want to say anything wrong, but a lot of people that travel don't really do that. They get on a tour bus, or they go straight to the big cities and attractions, and then they miss the places like Cromarty, places like the East Church, a 700-year-old sanctuary that we were able to spend some time in and even play a little music in.
1, 2, 3.
But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and I'll softly call. Good night and joy be with you all. Good night and joy be with you all.
Describing what makes Cromarty great is kind of like trying to describe why we love Richmond or Metamora or the UP so much. It's not necessarily about one thing, it's all of it. It's the old buildings, the friendly people, the local businesses. By our second morning there, we were chatting with the coffee shop owner about where he grew up in Australia and talking music. And by the way, that is so much of what we loved about Scotland. It was just relaxed and friendly, and we felt at home immediately. No one raised an eyebrow at us for having an accent. No one asked us about politics or Donald Trump. They just welcomed us in. When we had dinner our first night in Cromarty, an older gentleman at the bar asked us if we liked Cromarty. We told him that we were loving it so far. Then he asked us what the reason for our travels was, and we told him it was our honeymoon. In that conversation, we found out that he had traveled often to Indiana for business and had spent a lot of time in Evansville. It really is a small world. A few minutes later, the bartender brought us a couple scotches and pointed towards the gentleman. He raised his glass and said, "Best wishes for a happy life together." You want to know what Scotland is like? That sums it up pretty well.
So let's pour some wine and sing along.
Next week, we'll leave the Highlands and tell you about our stop at the Glenlivet Distillery, take you through some incredible abbeys, and visit Edinburgh. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.